says it's the biggest disruption since the in history. I would compare it to COVID, although it is not a demand shock, it's a supply shock, which in many ways is harder. It's harder for supply to come back than for demand to come back.
Torbjörn, Cornelia there saying Asia hit first, and for example, the Philippines has declared a national energy emergency. We've seen panic buying at the pumps in Australia. What's interesting, though, in the US, which has a degree of energy independence, the gas price, what they call petrol, has shot up. A gallon of gas, that's about 3.7 litres for people who measure it in a different way in the rest of the world, now costs about $4. That's a 34% rise since the war started. Nowhere is immune, is it?
No, absolutely. And you mentioned the fact that we're coming up to the 1 month mark of this conflict now, and that's really significant. If we think about the ripple effects, we saw first that countries in South Asia were very affected, then Southeast Asia, then East Asia. Now we're seeing Europe and the US as well. And if you think about the time it takes for a tanker to move from say the Persian Gulf with feedstock to a refinery, say in Japan or China, it's about 3 to 4 weeks. So we're reaching that point now. And of course, before the outbreak of the conflict, we saw that a lot of the producers in the region, were worried about conflict and potential disruption. They were trying essentially to get ahead of any conflict-related disruption, and so they front-loaded a lot of exports. And so that has helped mitigate some of the impact. But now, those cargoes that have been delivered, now we're seeing there's very little in the way of new cargoes coming from the Persian Gulf. And it's really now in the next few weeks that we will start to see much more significant price rises for consumers. We're going to see shortages for certain critical components like plastics. Packaging could become an issue. When you put all of this together, packaging, fuel costs, fertilizers, that all points towards more expensive food, more expensive energy, and generally speaking, just higher inflation around the world.
Nikolai, talk of those ripple effects, the knock-on effects. I mean, if these people, for example, in the US, are having to pay so much more for their gas, and that's countries all around the world, then those people aren't able to spend money on other things they would have done, like eating out, like food, like entertainment. And then you have not just petrol, you have diesel costs, which is a lot of the trucks around the world, which are obviously used to transport agricultural produce and the like. This is just going to reverberate, is it not?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the conflict with which we're dealing right now and its impact on the economy is quite unprecedented. As it was mentioned, it's affecting not simply like the demand side that we could see, for instance, during Russia-Ukraine and beginning of the Russian-Ukrainian war, but it's affecting the whole chain from the production, transportation, and consumption. So first of all, the reason why this conflict is dangerous in time, and time is not playing in our interest, is because it's affecting directly the supply side. So those volumes of oil, gas, and other materials that were coming from the Gulf, they are now in danger, and the resources, the stocks are depleting. That could help us to mitigate. But also, we are facing problems related with the transportation. The security of the transportation is becoming an important factor with the rising cost of this transportation on the top. So the rerouting of the materials coming to the Gulf or out of the Gulf is already giving an extra expenses, in addition to the danger that is still represented posed to this transportation by Iran and its proxies in the region. And finally, as you mentioned, consumers. So we definitely will see changing behavior in those countries that are dependent on the petrochemical production. We will see changes in those countries that are extremely sensitive to the cost of the inputs, and definitely the behavior of the households will finally put the pressure on the top. And from this point of view, the main important point here is that time is playing against us, as opposed to the previous conflicts, where actually time was in favor of the distribution of the supplies and stabilization. Now we are not seeing this happening.
Cornelia, I mean, Saudi Arabia is clearly one of the very key players here. It is managing to get crude oil out through a pipeline, its back door in effect, which is the port of Yanbu on the Red Sea. There is an even worse case scenario, isn't there? Because the Houthis there, at the moment, they're letting that oil go and those shipments go, but some are worried that they may get pressure from Iran to actually stop that route as well.
Well, let us pray that this is not happening. When I look at it, Saudi Arabia was very, very wise. 40 years ago, they started to think of how dependent are we on the Strait of Hormuz, and they started building that pipeline. It has a capacity of about 7 million barrels a day. 2 million go to the refinery in Yanbu, and 5 million would be dedicated to exports. Right now, they're putting about 3.5 million through. Now, these are not light switches. So that's good. But, you know, I look at that, then I look at 1.5 million barrels a day that can go through the pipeline in UAE from the oil fields to Fujairah, to the Gulf of Oman. And then I'm looking at a very small pipeline which can put another extra 300,000 barrels a day from the Kurdish region of Iraq to Turkey. But you know, together, that gives us around 6, maybe maximum 6 million barrels a day, and we're talking of a shortfall of about 20 million barrels a day in terms of crude and product. So